My feeling, very strong feeling, is that we're looking at a two-phase construction site in many of the so-called Inca stone monuments.
High above Cusco, the jagged limestone teeth of Sacsayhuaman defy explanation. We are told the Inca built this fortress with bronze tools and sheer willpower, but the monolithic stones, some weighing 120 tons, fit with a precision that rejects a single blade of grass. Now, ground-penetrating radar has revealed a shocking truth. These walls don't end at the soil. A massive, complex structure remains buried beneath our feet, suggesting that what we see is merely the tip of a prehistoric iceberg. The surface illusion, what we see. The ascent from the bustling plazas of Cusco to the plateau of Sacsayhuaman is a journey through time, but what greets the traveler at the summit is a visual paradox that defies conventional history. Spanning 3 parallel tiers of zigzagging terraces, the limestone walls stretch across the landscape like the serrated teeth of a mountain god. To the casual observer, it is a fortress of staggering proportions. To the engineer, it is an impossibility. The visible blocks are not merely large, they are monolithic, with the largest specimen, a centerpiece of the lower terrace, weighing an estimated 120 tons. Yet, the true mystery of Sacsayhuaman begins not with the size of the stones, but with the silence between them. These blocks are joined with a polygonal precision so absolute that a razor blade cannot find purchase in the seams. There is no mortar, no cement, and no adhesive. The stones are held together by gravity, friction, and a geometry so complex it suggests the builders were mapping the rock rather than cutting it. This surface-level mastery has long been the primary focus of Incan studies, attributed to the reign of Pachacuti in the 15th century. But as we look closer at the weathering patterns and the sheer scale of the displacement, a haunting question arises. Are we looking at the finished product or just the roof of something far older? The sheer mass of the visible walls creates a physical weight that the surrounding soil seems to swallow. When the Spanish conquistadors first arrived in the 30s, they were convinced the site was the work of demons. They could not conceive of a culture without iron or draft horses moving stones the size of houses across the rugged Andean terrain. To hide their awe, they used the site as a quarry, dismantling the smaller upper sections of the complex to build the colonial churches and mansions of Cusco. What remains today is the megalithic skeleton, the stones too heavy to be stolen, too dense to be destroyed. However, the logic of structural engineering dictates that a wall rising 30 feet into the air, composed of 100-ton boulders, cannot simply sit atop the dirt. In a region plagued by frequent, violent earthquakes, a top-heavy structure of this magnitude would have collapsed into a chaotic heap centuries ago. Instead, Sacsayhuaman has stood firm, while the colonial city below has been leveled and rebuilt multiple times. This seismic resilience suggests that the teeth of the fortress are anchored deep into the crust of the earth. The visible walls are a mask, a grand architectural facade that draws the eye upward, while the true foundation remains shrouded in darkness. As we walk the perimeter of the throne of the Inca, the rock formations known as the rodaderos reveal strange vitrified surfaces, limestone that appears to have been softened or molded like clay. This suggests a mastery of material science that goes beyond simple chiseling. The surface stones are smoothed to a reflective finish, but as they disappear into the ground, the masonry becomes even more robust. Modern excavations have begun to peel back the layers of topsoil, revealing that the first tier of the zigzag walls is actually the 4th or 5th tier of a much deeper vertical descent. We are standing on the shoulders of a subterranean giant. This realization shifts the entire narrative of the site. If the visible walls are merely the upper layers, then the volume of stone moved by the ancients is not double what we estimated, but perhaps triple or quadruple. The logistical feat of quarrying, transporting, and fitting these blocks becomes an exponential challenge. Why would a civilization invest such staggering resources into a foundation that was meant to be buried? The answer lies in the Incan concept of the Ucupacha, the inner world. For the Andean mind, the roots of a structure were as spiritually and physically significant as the branches. Current archaeological surveys are now focusing on the interlocking nature of the underground levels. These are not just rough-hewn pilings, they are finished, polished blocks that continue the same tight-fit aesthetic several meters below the grass line. This suggests that at one point in the distant past, the ground level was significantly lower, or that the builders intentionally filled the site with structural fill to create the plateau we see today. We are walking on a man-made mountain, a terraced pyramid of limestone that uses the earth itself as a casing. The transition from what is seen to what is hidden marks the boundary between history and mystery. As the sun sets over the Cusco Valley, the shadows of the zigzag walls lengthen, pointing toward the heavy, undisturbed earth of the central plaza. Beneath that soil lies a ghost map of a civilization that understood the earth's bones. But as the shovels break ground, the radar begins to ping, revealing that the stone walls are merely the gates to a vast, dark labyrinth. Below the surface, the GPR break through. For decades, the secrets of Sacsayhuaman were protected by the very earth that sought to reclaim it. Archaeologists relied on the visible, the massive ramparts, and the carved outcroppings, while the space beneath the central plaza remained a silent, grassy void. However, the advent of ground-penetrating radar, GPR, has acted as a digital shovel, allowing researchers to peer through the limestone and clay without disturbing a single grain of soil. The results, finalized in the 2024 to 2025 survey seasons, have sent shockwaves through the academic community. The radar pings didn't just find a few stray foundations, they mapped a sprawling, multi-layered architectural complex that effectively doubles the known size of the site. The breakthrough began when researchers directed their high-frequency electromagnetic pulses toward the esplanade, the large open field between the zigzag walls and the Rodadero Hills. Standard archaeological theory suggested this was a ceremonial parade ground, leveled and cleared by the Inca. The GPR data told a far more complex story. Beneath the surface lies a shadow city, a network of rectangular structures, drainage canals, and massive stone flooring that mirrors the precision of the walls above. The most startling discovery was the depth. In some areas, the radar identified anomalies reaching as far as 8 meters, 26 feet, underground, suggesting that the current ground level is an artificial cap placed over an older, more intricate landscape. The centerpiece of this subterranean revelation is the confirmation of the Grand Chana. While local legends have long whispered of Inca tunnels connecting the fortress to the city below, these stories were often dismissed as folklore or exaggerated natural limestone caverns. The 2024 GPR mapping, however, provided the first concrete evidence of a man-made stone-lined tunnel stretching over 1,750 meters. This is not a mere crawl space. It is a monumental engineering feat. The tunnel originates beneath the Muyucmarca tower, dives deep into the bedrock, and maintains a consistent grade as it travels toward the Coricancha, the Temple of the Sun, in the heart of Cusco. The precision required to navigate nearly 2 kilometers of solid Andean rock, maintaining structural integrity and ventilation, suggests a level of geodetic knowledge that challenges our understanding of 15th century technology. This underground network changes the why of Sacsayhuaman. If the site were merely a fortress, these tunnels would serve as escape routes or supply lines, but the radar reveals that these passages are part of a broader integrated system. The GPR identified massive subterranean chambers at the intersections of the tunnels, some containing what appear to be stone altars or water management valves. This points to a dual purpose, a physical stronghold above and a spiritual or scientific laboratory below. The iceberg theory is no longer a fringe hypothesis. It is a measurable reality. The volume of stone utilized in the subterranean foundations and tunnels rivals the tonnage of the visible walls, forcing a total recalculation of the labor hours required to construct the complex. What the GPR highlights most poignantly is the continuity of craftsmanship. One might expect the hidden parts of a building to be rough or utilitarian, yet the radar profiles of the buried walls show the same tight-fitting polygonal blocks found on the surface. Why polish a stone that will never see the sun? This level of hidden perfectionism suggests that the builders were not performing for human eyes. Instead, the subterranean structures may have been designed to interact with the Earth's natural energies or to serve as a permanent, seismic dampening root system for the towers above. By locking the massive surface blocks into a deep underground grid, the builders created a structure that does not sit on the mountain, but becomes part of the mountain. Furthermore, the radar has identified what appears to be a lost tier of the zigzag walls. Beneath the current lowest level of visible masonry, the GPR detected a fourth and fifth line of walls perfectly aligned with the ones above, but buried under several meters of sediment. This discovery suggests a catastrophic event in the distant past, perhaps a massive flood or a tectonic shift that buried the lower half of the monument. If the Inca found the site already partially buried and chose to build upon it, the timeline of Sacsayhuaman must be pushed back by centuries, if not millennia. We are looking at a chronological puzzle where the most important pieces have been hidden under our feet for 500 years. The GPR data also solved the mystery of the missing water source. For years, historians wondered how thousands of soldiers or priests could survive on the plateau without a visible spring. The radar revealed a sophisticated hydroengineering system consisting of stone-lined underground cisterns and pressurized conduits that drew water from the surrounding mountains and circulated it through the foundations of the towers. This wasn't just a building. It was a living machine, utilizing the subterranean space to manage resources with a precision that modern municipal systems would envy. As the digital maps are refined, the image of Sacsayhuaman transforms from a static pile of rocks into a dynamic, three-dimensional labyrinth. The ground is no longer a floor, it is a ceiling. Every step taken on the grass of the esplanade is a step over a hollow history, a series of voids filled with the echoes of a lost science. The GPR has pulled back the curtain, but the light it sheds only deepens the shadows. We now know what is down there, but the question of how such a massive underground world was carved into the granite remains the ultimate barrier. But even the most advanced radar cannot explain the impossible physics of the stones themselves. How did a primitive culture mold solid rock like warm wax? Precision beyond tools, the engineering mystery. The revelation that Sacsayhuaman extends deep into the bedrock only intensifies the central enigma of its construction, the impossible fit of its stones. While the subterranean findings provide a new scale for the site, they also export the mystery of the surface into the earth. To understand the massive structure beneath, one must first confront the physics of the stones above. Standard archaeological narratives suggest that the Inca used harder stones, like hematite or river cobbles, to pound the limestone into shape through a process of trial and error. Yet, when one examines the sheer volume of the blocks, both those visible and those now known to be buried, the pounding theory collapses under the weight of logistical reality. We are looking at millions of tons of stone, fitted with a tolerance that modern masons, equipped with diamond-tipped saws and laser levels, would find daunting. At the heart of this engineering mystery is the concept of polygonal masonry. Unlike the uniform, rectangular bricks of the Roman Empire or the Greek Parthenon, the stones of Sacsayhuaman are irregular, multi-sided polygons. Some blocks have 12, 20, or even 30 distinct angles, all of which must align perfectly with the corresponding angles of the surrounding stones. This is not just a two-dimensional puzzle, it is a three-dimensional interlocking system. If a single angle is off by a fraction of a degree, the entire wall loses its integrity. This method of construction creates a floating effect during earthquakes. Instead of cracking, the stones dance in place, dissipating the kinetic energy of the tremor before settling back into their original positions. This is seismic engineering of the highest order, hidden within the aesthetic of a giant jigsaw puzzle. The mystery deepens when we look at the textures of the stones themselves. In several areas of the site, particularly near the subterranean entrances and the throne of the Inca, the limestone displays a phenomenon known as vitrification. The surface of the rock appears glassy, as if it were subjected to intense heat or a chemical process that temporarily softened the stone's molecular structure. This has led to the controversial but persistent theory of stone softening. Proponents of this idea suggest that the ancient builders possessed a botanical or chemical knowledge, perhaps derived from specific Andean plants like the pito, that allowed them to turn solid rock into a clay-like consistency. This would explain how 100-ton blocks could be pressed against one another to achieve a perfect airtight seal. If the stones were soft when they were placed, the fit would not be a matter of carving, but of molding. This theory gains traction when observing the indentations or protrusions found on the faces of many megaliths. These small, nub-like handles appear to be leftovers from the casting or transport process, yet they show no signs of tool marks or percussion. They look, quite literally, like finger marks in dough. If this technology was used to build the visible walls, it was almost certainly used for the massive foundations beneath. The GPR data from Section 2 shows that these underground blocks maintain the same vitrified, molded quality. This implies that the subterranean world was not a rough-and-tumble basement, but a precision-engineered environment. The builders were not just stacking rocks. They were manipulating the very state of matter to create a permanent, indestructible anchor for their civilization. The logistical challenge of the underground iceberg cannot be overstated. In the scope of this story, we must consider the sheer caloric intake and organization required to manage such a project. To move a 120-ton block from the quarries of Muyucmarca over miles of mountainous terrain and then lower it into a deep, precisely carved trench requires more than just manpower. It requires a mastery of friction. Some engineers suggest the use of massive earthen ramps, but the footprint of such ramps would have been larger than the fortress itself. Others suggest a system of pulleys and counterweights that have long since rotted away. However, no evidence of such machines exists in the archaeological record. The mystery is not just in the stones, but in the absence of the tools that shaped them. Furthermore, the engineering of the subterranean drainage systems discovered by the GPR reveals a sophisticated understanding of fluid dynamics. The water channels buried beneath the zigzag walls are not simple ditches. They are carved with specific gradients to prevent siltation and managed with stone valves to control the flow during the rainy season. This level of hydraulic engineering suggests that Sacsayhuaman was a smart structure. The builders were aware that the greatest threat to a megalithic foundation is not the weight of the stone, but the erosion caused by trapped water. By creating a permeable, breathing foundation that managed water through a hidden labyrinth, they ensured the site's survival for over 500 years of Andean winters. As we investigate the transition from the surface to the depths, we find that the precision of the stonework actually increases as the blocks get larger and deeper. The stones at the very base of the structure, those that form the foundation of the legendary towers, are among the most perfectly fitted in the entire complex. This contradicts the usual evolution of a site, where the foundations are rough and the finish grows more refined toward the top. It suggests that the most critical, most difficult work was done first, and done with the most advanced techniques available. It is as if the builders knew that the secret to immortality lay not in what the sun could see, but in what the earth could hold. The engineering of Sacsayhuaman is a silent witness to a lost science. Whether through the application of intense heat, chemical softening, or a geometric understanding far beyond our own, the builders created a monument that defies the entropy of time. The massive stones beneath the ground are the silent partners in this miracle. They are the roots that allow the limestone teeth of the fortress to bite into the sky, unchanging and unyielding, while the world around them turns to dust. But these stones do more than just stand. They lead somewhere. Deep within the foundations lie the remains of 3 great towers and the gateway to a hidden world: the Muyucmarca and the Subterranean network. If the zigzag walls are the armor of Sacsayhuaman, then the towers that once stood upon the summit were its mind and heart. Specifically, the Muyucmarca, a circular tower whose foundations remain as a haunting blueprint on the site's upper terrace, serves as the primary anchor for the subterranean network. For centuries, historians viewed the Muyucmarca as a simple watchtower or a water tank. However, recent excavations and GPR mapping have revealed that the circular stone rings visible today are merely the rim of a deep, cylindrical shaft that plunges into the earth, acting as a vertical hub for the labyrinthine tunnels that radiate outward like the spokes of a wheel. The Muyucmarca's design is a marvel of sacred geometry. It consists of 3 concentric stone circles, the outermost being roughly 27 meters in diameter. What makes it unique in the Andean world is the central conduit. Beneath the floor of the tower lies a complex drainage and ventilation system that connects directly to the 1,750-meter tunnel leading to Cusco. This was not a passive structure. It was a functional node in a citywide system. The GPR data suggests that the tower functioned as a pressure valve for the subterranean network, allowing air to circulate and water to be diverted through pressurized stone pipes. The precision of the underground masonry here exceeds even that of the defensive walls. While the surface stones are weathered by the elements, the subterranean stones of the Muyucmarca's root are pristine, featuring the same glassy, vitrified finish discussed in the previous section. This subterranean network was not purely utilitarian. It was deeply rooted in the Andean concept of Ucupacha, the inner world or the domain of the ancestors. To the Inca and their predecessors, the ground was not a solid, dead mass, but a living, breathing entity. The tunnels connecting Sacsayhuaman to the Coricancha were likely used for ritual processions, where priests would move from the celestial heights of the fortress to the solar heart of the city without ever emerging into the sunlight. The GPR has identified several expanded chambers along these tunnel routes, rooms that are too large to be simple maintenance alcoves. These chambers contain carved niches and stone platforms, suggesting they served as subterranean shrines or bunkers for the Empire's most sacred relics during times of war or solar eclipses. The architecture of these underground rooms challenges the standard narrative of primitive excavation. These were not tunnels dug through dirt. They were carved out of solid limestone and then lined with megalithic blocks to prevent collapse. The logistical nightmare of such a feat, removing thousands of tons of rock through narrow apertures and then fitting 10-ton lining blocks in total darkness, implies a mastery of logistics that borders on the modern. Lighting these tunnels would have required more than simple torches, which would have depleted oxygen rapidly. Researchers have theorized about the use of reflective gold plates to bounce sunlight from the surface into the depths, or perhaps a chemical light source that has left no trace in the archaeological record. Furthermore, the relationship between the three towers, Muyucmarca, Paucarmarca, and Salakmarca, reveals a hidden symmetry. While they appear as separate structures on the surface, the GPR shows they are all connected by a triangular underground gallery. This golden triangle formed a subterranean citadel that could have housed thousands of people during a siege. It was a city within a mountain. The implications are staggering. Sacsayhuaman was not just a fortress to be defended from the outside, but a self-sustaining ecosystem that utilized the constant temperature and security of the earth to preserve the elite of Incan society. As we trace the path from the towers into the deep tunnels, we encounter the chincanas, or labyrinths. Local tradition tells of travelers who entered these tunnels and never returned, lost in a maze that supposedly stretches as far as the jungle or the coast. While modern science has yet to confirm such vast distances, the 1.7-kilometer tunnel already verified is enough to rewrite the history books. It confirms that the Andean builders were as much master miners as they were master masons. They viewed the mountain as a block of marble to be hollowed out, creating a three-dimensional masterpiece where the space between the stones was as important as the stones themselves. The discovery of this subterranean network also explains why the Spanish were so eager to fill in the tunnels and tear down the towers. They didn't just fear the military advantage the tunnels provided, they feared the spiritual power they represented. By burying the entrances to the Ucupacha, the conquistadors hoped to sever the connection between the Andean people and their ancestral earth. But the GPR has shown that the earth does not forget. The Muyucmarca still stands as a silent sentinel over a hidden world, its stone roots reaching down into a past that is finally beginning to surface. But if the technology used to carve these depths is so advanced, it begs the most controversial question of all. Did the Inca actually build it, or did they simply inherit it? Rewriting the timeline, who really built it? The discovery of a massive, technologically advanced sub-city beneath Sacsayhuaman forces a confrontation with the most guarded pillar of Andean archaeology, the timeline. For decades, the standard historical consensus has been that the Inca, beginning under Sapa Inca Pachacuti around 1440 AD, constructed the site in a feverish 70-year burst of labor. However, the sheer volume of the underground structures, combined with the geological evidence of the buried lower tiers, suggests a construction period that might span centuries, if not millennia. If the Inca were the final occupants, who were the original architects? The first clues appeared not in the megaliths themselves, but in the soil. In the early 2000s, archaeologists identified the Quilca culture, which occupied the Cusco Valley from roughly 900 to 1200 AD. Excavations revealed that the Kilki had built significant portions of the site long before the first official Incan stone was laid. This discovery was the first crack in the traditional narrative. If the Kilki were responsible for the foundational layers, it implies that the Inca were not the creators of the megalithic style, but rather the heirs to a pre-existing tradition of high-precision engineering. Yet, even the Kilki remains are often found on top of the largest, most vitrified blocks, suggesting an even deeper, more ancient layer of occupation. This has led to the lost civilization hypothesis, championed by researchers who point to the stylistic disconnect between the different layers of the site. At Sacsayhuaman, one can see three distinct styles of masonry. The top layers are often composed of smaller, roughly hewn stones held together with mortar, classic Incan provincial work. Below those are the medium-sized, finely fitted rectangular blocks. At the very bottom, forming the foundations that dive deep into the earth, are the massive polygonal megaliths. Paradoxically, the oldest layers appear to be the most technologically advanced. In the standard arc of human progress, tools and techniques are supposed to improve over time. At Sacsayhuaman, the opposite seems true. The deeper you go, the more impossible the engineering becomes. The geological evidence found in the subterranean tunnels further complicates the 15th century date. Geologists have noted that the weathering on the limestone throne and the vitrified surfaces of the lower foundations suggest exposure to the elements for a period much longer than 500 years. Some estimates, based on the rate of limestone erosion in the high-altitude Andean environment, suggest the primary megalithic work could be 5,000 to 10,000 years old. This would place the construction of the subterranean iceberg at the end of the last ice age, aligning it with other mysterious global sites like Göbekli Tepe. If this is true, the Inca didn't build Sacsayhuaman. They found it, cleared the debris of millennia, and repurposed it as their greatest crown jewel. Furthermore, the 2024 to 2025 GPR data reveals that the underground chambers were modified multiple times. There are architectural scars where older, precision-carved walls were roughly patched with smaller Incan stones. This suggests a sequence of rediscovery. A pre-megalithic culture may have carved the initial tunnel network and the massive foundation tiers. A later group, perhaps the Kilki, occupied the surface. And finally, the Inca arrived, recognized the site's strategic and spiritual power, and built the zigzag ramparts we see today. The Inca were masters of unifying their empire by absorbing the sacred sites of those who came before them. And Sacsayhuaman would have been the ultimate prize. This layered history explains the technical anomalies that baffle modern engineers. If the Inca were using bronze chisels, they were likely working on the upper, smaller tiers. But the massive 100-ton blocks with their vitrified, glassy finishes belong to a different era of metallurgy or stone-softening technology, a lost science that disappeared from the archaeological record before the Inca rose to power. By acknowledging that the structure beneath the ground changes everything, we are forced to admit that our map of human history in the Americas is missing its most significant chapter. We are looking at a legacy of architectural genius that doesn't just predate the Inca, but perhaps predates our current understanding of civilization itself. As the sun sets over the Andes, the shadows of the stones point not toward the future, but toward a past that is much deeper than we ever dared to dig. Uncover the truth hidden beneath the stone. Subscribe now to join our next expedition into the unknown.